Thank you for presiding over our debate this afternoon and giving us the opportunity to discuss an issue that is of such concern to the City of Coventry, to local people and most particularly to Sky Blue fans. Coventry City Football Club has been in deep financial difficulty for many years. 5 years ago, when it had lost its ground, Highfield Road, and most of its assets, it was sold 20 minutes before the administrators took over to the hedge fund CCFC. CCFC specialise in acquiring distressed assets. Under them, the club's ownership is multi-layered, opaque, and partly offshore in the Cayman Islands. It is claimed that they have lost £43 million over the period, but nobody can be sure, as management fees, substantial management fees of millions of pounds, are passed between layers of ownership, and debentures seem to protect unknown investors. A bitter battle is waged for the last year over the rent and the ownership of the Ricoh Arena where the club play. The club owners have been on a rent strike. They say they're fighting for a more realistic settlement for a League One club, while Arena Coventry Limited, jointly owned by the City Council and the Alan Higgs charity, believe the agenda has been to destabilise the Arena company and thereby gain control at a fire sale price. A much lowered rent has been offered, but the dispute goes on. Meanwhile, the fans and the people of Coventry despair as the club's owners threaten to liquidate the business or move the club out of the city. I'm grateful to the Football League, who yesterday, ahead of this debate, issued a statement reiterating their position. They have said any application to move the club to a stadium outside the city would need to be considered by the board of the Football League. In doing so, the board would require the club to demonstrate that it had a clear path for returning to Coventry within a prescribed timeframe. I hope that the League's rules will therefore not allow CCFC to do anything like that was done at Wimbledon. I know the League have a reform of governance programme underway, and that is an issue upon which I would like the Minister to comment. The League, within the democratic control of the clubs themselves, can only do so much. Do the government believe that this will be adequate to the challenges that the game faces? While the dispute between the parties on the rent level has been in the public domain for many months, and inevitably there is much innuendo and allegation that surrounds this kind of dispute, there is one aspect of it that seems key. There has not had any public exposure. But if we are to go forward, it needs to be flushed out. The football club's owners are seeking to challenge the validity of the original rental agreement made back in 2002 and are using that challenge in an attempt to discredit the City Council's motives for paying £14 million to the Yorkshire Bank in December for the stadium's debts. I cannot see what right the club owners have to issue threats on this. They bought the club over five years later. They had the opportunity to do due diligence. And I would hope that the principle of caveat emptor would mean something in this case. If this club, if this hedge fund is allowed to reopen this issue, it's a blatant attempt to profit at the expense of those who built and paid for the stadium, in part the people of Coventry. I'll give way to mine. honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He obviously has done a considerable investigation into this matter. And I have had the impression that the parent company, Cisco, actually bought the football club to acquire the stadium. That's my view, and I've not really gone into it in depth. But has he considered maybe a way forward, and he would know better than I do, is it worthwhile exploring arbitration? I don't know. He's dealt with a lot more, as I say, than I have.
I'll come on later in my speech to exactly that point, because it is a potential way forward that has been put to the club owners in the last few days. Returning to this issue of whether or not the club be allowed to reopen the agreements that existed long before they arrived in the city and took over the club. Martin Reeves and Chris West from the City Council and Arena Coventry Limited dismissed these threats as desperate stuff. However, the club owners must, in my view, be prepared to publicly justify their threats and allegations or drop the issue if we are going to be able to find a way forward, and I challenge them to do that. The Sky Blue Trust, who seek to represent fans, now have over 800 members. This is an indication of the growing level of alarm that there is among fans. And I want to thank them for their help and support in preparing for this debate and for all the work that they've done over the last few years. They have a proposition that I put to the club owners yesterday. Binding arbitration conducted by a local man, a very well qualified man, a Dr. John Beach, who has a PhD in business strategy from Cranfield University and over 5 years' experience examining football finance. Board member Mark Labovich indicated his enthusiasm for this course of action. However, the response that I've received today is an indication of how difficult it is to deal with Joy Sapala and her team. The response I've had seeks to turn the idea of arbitration or binding arbitration into an opportunity to investigate Arena Coventry's finances, set the agenda for the arbiters, but of course there is no suggestion that the football club's finances or that the football club's ownership structure should be subjected to investigation. And I will, of course, give way to
for raising a very important matter, because the fortunes of top sporting clubs are key in any community, and the fortunes of Coventry City are very important to my constituents in rugby, with Coventry City being their closest league club. In rugby, where some of us play a game with a slightly different shaped ball, we recently saw the administration of our top rugby club, Rugby Lions, when it took some time for the administrative body of the sport to get involved. I wonder if the Right Honourable Gentleman believes that currently the football authorities are as sufficiently involved as they might be.
I accept what the Honourable Gentleman says, and I'm going to raise the generality of the need for new governance in football, and I think that does apply to other businesses and certainly to other sporting businesses. We'll have to see what the Minister has to say, and whether or not the Minister can give us any comfort with regards to pressures that they might be putting on, or discussions that they might be putting on with these authorities to see to it that that the arrangements are sufficient to the task that they have in hand. Just on the issue of arbitration, before I move off it, I find it quite astonishing that Mr. Labovich, who is a member of the Football Board, sends me an email just a few minutes ago, and this is talking about the offer to arbitrate. I forgot to mention, Bob, he says, an hopefully obvious point. Arbitration should all be conducted in public, no hiding behind claims of commercial sensitivity. This from a company that is deliberately structured to prevent anybody from seeing what their business is, where the money is moved to, and who the eventual beneficiaries are. it defies its cheek beyond belief. Mrs Main, the Sky Blue Trust has campaigned for fans to be given a stake in the club. In the past, club owners have said they will do this, but when asked to make a firm offer, they've come up with 5 to 10% at a discount at some undefined future date, and no representation on the main board. The Sky Blue Trust feel that such an offer is of absolutely no value, as it will provide, as it simply will not provide the transparency necessary for good governance. I am also grateful to the enormously impressive Supporters Direct. They point out, and this goes right to the point that the honourable gentleman opposite made, that they point out that to anybody who will listen, that the record of football governance in this country is not good. 92 clubs have gone into receivership in the last 20 years. In Germany, where fan ownership is the norm, not one Bundesliga club has experienced insolvency since the league's creation in 1963. And I asked the Minister, is the government happy with English football's governance? We have seen banking regulation fail us spectacularly. Aren't the same issues, lack of accountability, greed, and a lack of transparency, a problem in football too? Mrs Main, the Ricoh Arena has massive potential benefit in the most economically deprived part of Coventry. It is directly connected to the motorway network and soon will be to the railway. Many in the city have worked hard to get what was a derelict, contaminated site brought back into economic use, and the city is open to plans that would bring so much more benefit. Many of us accept the need for a realistic approach to the lease and management issues if the stadium is to reach its full potential, and changes would get support for the right partner at the right time. But SISU are not entitled to bully their way to control over an asset they never provided, they never built, and they never paid for. They must prove that they are not simply a predator with greed running through their DNA before they could expect this kind of treatment. The football club is a most valuable part of our city's life. In an age when communities struggle for relevance, it has the capacity to motivate and to give people collective spirit. This dispute has gone on for far too long and needs to be brought to a conclusion. But I fear that SISU, despite their words, slick presentations, have no interest in those kind of things.
Would the Right Honourable Member...
I'll give way to the Honourable
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for giving way. And as a Huddersfield Town fan, my club is very much at the heart of my community, raising hundreds of thousands of pounds for the Yorkshire Ambulance. We would like to wish Coventry City, us Huddersfield fans, because Mark Robbins recently moved as manager. We feel a close kinship. We went through our own financial problems in the last decade. And only on Friday night, I spent the evening at a charity dinner with Brian Kilcline, who lifted the FA Cup for Coventry City in 1987. I told him about this debate, and he sent his best wishes to all Sky Blue fans as well. So please, good luck with your quest here to save the club for the community.
Mr Ainsworth.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman, and for Coventry, 1987 was the pinnacle so far, of what can be achieved by a football club on behalf of a city, and the entire city, whether they were football fans or rugby fans or whatever they were, really were lifted, for such a long time on that magnificent occasion, and we want to see many more of them, but we all fear that we're not going to see such occasions unless there is a new settlement and a new realism and a new acceptance of community responsibility from the owners of the club and a constructive approach to settling the dispute which they appear to have deliberately prolonged, and they're not stupid. We're dealing with, clever people here, and so one has to assume that their motives are not good for the community, for the city, or for the club and its fans. Mrs. Main, I'd like the Minister to respond to the need for reform of governance and transparency of our national game. I want to ask the Minister whether or not he's looked at the reform programme of the Football League and whether he believes that it's adequate to the challenge that the game faces. My reading of it is that it would not have helped us to any great extent in the current problems that exist in Coventry. But if the Minister can say otherwise, I would be very pleased to hear it. I'd like to ask the Minister whether or not the government has looked at Supporters Direct's licensing proposals. And I want to know whether or not he believes that they could provide sustainability and accountability for what is overwhelmingly our biggest national sporting game. And to the club, I would just like to say there has been a reduced rent offer. If they want to be taken seriously, the time has long passed for them to respond clearly by accepting or putting a clear counter-proposal rather than deliberate obfuscation and delay for whatever motives that we have seen go on for month after month. A reasonable response to the proposition for binding arbitration, my honourable friend mentioned it a little while ago, would have been an opportunity for the club to win trust. If they had have accepted that proposition, they would have seen the supporters' trust. Myself, I don't know how many others would have been prepared to join with them in saying that that was a reasonable way forward. My honourable friend has raised it independently here today. So he is, would have been minded, to have got behind this. But the response that we've had, they have absolutely failed to grasp the opportunity that was given to them to get with the parts of the community that care so much about the football club and about economic development in the city. And I would ask them, instead of all of the deliberate talk, innuendo, attempts at destroying reputations that have gone on, that they come clean about the threats that they are making over the 2002 rental agreement. If we had some kind of straight response from the owners, even at this late stage, there would be some goodwill that would rally to their cause. And they really have to start and look at the behaviour that we've seen over far, far too long. Thank you, Mrs. May.
Mrs. Main, thank you very much. And can I start by thanking the Right Honourable Member for Coventry North firstly for securing this debate and for the contribution he's made today. As I hope he knows, he's a well-respected member of both this House and indeed in the Ministry of Defence, where he served with much distinction at the end of the last government, and you could see that in the way he presented his case today. Could I also just record a small apology to him for a bit of confusion over who was going to respond to this. As I think he knows, I was due to be in a bill committee all afternoon, which fortunately wound down a little bit early, but I'm sorry if that caused any confusion. Let me say at the outset that I thought he put his case extremely well. I entirely agree with him over almost everything he said, and I would very much like to place on the record my sympathy to the fans of his football club, Coventry Football Club, for the position in which they have been put and the way this has come about. I don't think anybody who cares about football clubs or sport in general could find the series of events that he has outlined today in any way satisfactory. Indeed, I think almost everybody would conclude that that is a disastrous way to run a sports club by anybody's judgment. And, of course, the tragedy, in a sense, is that the situation that he outlines is not unique to his club. At some stage over the past 10 years, more than half of the Football League's 72 clubs have been insolvent at some stage. And that is clearly not a satisfactory situation. Rather than read through the prepared speaking note, if he's happy, I might just try and answer the various questions that he's proposed of government, or he's posed to government. The first one of these was, does the government believe that the Football League's approach is sufficient? I think it is fair to say that under the leadership of Greg Clark, the Football League has made considerable strides, and absolutely, as I would expect of him, absolutely fairly, the Right Honourable Gentleman alluded to that in his remarks. And the tightening up of many of the financial fair play rules that have happened under the current chairman's watch are very welcomed, very necessary, and absolutely a step in the right direction. Indeed, when he was interviewed by the DCMS Select Committee as part of their inquiry into football governance, he was very straightforward about it. He said very simply that debt is the single biggest problem for football. And that is entirely mirrored in what the Right Honourable Gentleman says today. He asked me the question, do I think that that will in itself be sufficient? And the answer to him, honestly, is no, I don't. And I think there is a great deal more ground to be covered. And I'll come on to some of the ways that we're trying to cover that in a moment. The second area that he touched on was the legal dispute between the club owners and the City Council. I hope he won't think I'm ducking this completely. If I say that without detailed knowledge of that, it is difficult to comment in any great detail. And certainly from what he said, it sounds like a very unsatisfactory situation at the least. And clearly, if that is going to lead to legal action, I have to be a little bit careful. But yes, of course.
I have an interest in the club to declare, and I do that willingly at the committee stage now. Would the Minister find any way in which he could facilitate mediation in this affair before he moves on to the general considerations? I mean, the two are locked in it seems, a very deeply held, personal, embittered struggle, and somebody needs to find a way to help them out of it. Now, I know he can't appoint a mediator. Is there anybody within the department, though, who could go up and start to use the influence, the enormous influence of his office, to facilitate that event taking place? It is difficult, but I'm sure if he could be positive, it would help. I'm grateful.
Thank the Honourable Member for that intervention. I mean, I have no, as he's probably aware, as a Minister, I have no statutory power to intervene in this area. Though that's not, of course, quite what he's asking for, is it? He's really asking whether I could use my good offices to try and effect a solution. I think what I'd say about this is I'd be actually very happy to, have enough respect for all the Honourable Gentlemen, particularly for the Right Honourable Gentleman with whom I've dealt with over many years, to say to him simply, if there is a stage at which he felt that could be helpful, and he knows exactly the powers and limitations of what a minister can achieve in these circumstances, I would be very happy to do anything to help. When the danger is always, once you've played that card, you may have sort of, that is really the final card you can play, and it might be better to try some other avenues first. Yeah.
I would just say to the Minister that I would be wary about asking him to get involved in mediation, because it is seen, it is a proposal that's been put forward by the club themselves, and there are grave worries that it may be just part of the prevarication that has gone on for some time for whatever motives there are.
Minister.
Well, that's a very helpful intervention. I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for it. I leave it with him. If he felt there was something that I could do to help, I'd be very happy to do that. I mean, I suspect a more obvious target might be the chairman of the Football League, actually, who is supposed to be independent in these matters. He asked about supporter representation on the board. There's a third. Yeah.
My right honourable friend there, assuming that it's impossible. And it is bitter, and they're at it like that all the time. It does need an extraneous, I wouldn't say intervention, but it needs somebody who would go in there with a cool head, look at the two sides, not take a prejudiced position, and try to bring them together. That would be the role. I appreciate he has no statutory powers.
No, the Honourable Gentleman puts that very well. I mean, that really is the role that should be carried out by the Football League in the first instance. But if for any reason that proves impossible, then I'd be very happy to look at any sensible proposal. He asked about supporter representation on the board. I'll come on to the sort of bigger ticket way that this is being dealt with in a moment. I'd simply say to him, I've always worried about this one a little bit, having looked at this for most of my 3 years as a minister, in that it can become a bit of an Aunt Sally. It's not much use having one supporter on a board if there are 10 others who can vote him or her down on each and every occasion. It's really about the message that it sends out. Absolutely, the drift from government and indeed from the DCMS Select Committee, cross-party DCMS Select Committee, has been that this is an area that needs to be addressed, that supporters have, up till this point, been underrepresented in the running of football clubs. They have been under-consulted and their views have not been sufficiently taken account of in the way that football clubs are run. The football authorities, I'll come on to this process in a minute, have been invited to bring forward proposals. It remains to be seen precisely where those get. I would hope, if this area was working well, that there might, you would probably find that there would be different solutions that would work for different clubs, depending on their ownership structures and the history of their involvement with with supporters. If, of course, that doesn't happen, then the government will have to take action, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And the fourth question, which really wraps all this up, is the government happy with football governance? And the honest answer to that is no. That then leads to the question, what have we actually done about it? And the answer is that, there has been some progress over the last couple of years. All 92 professional clubs are now adopting the financial fair play proposals. We'll come on to the DCMS Select Committee process in a moment. And the FA has finally set up an FA regulatory authority that will have powers to determine applications under FA and league licences and directors' criteria and look after moves. But we were aware, I think it was very soon after I became a minister, I turned up for a sort of Wednesday morning debate here in Westminster Hall to find the best part of 60 members of Parliament who wanted to speak in this. It's pretty clear to me that football governance was an area that across the House was causing some concern. In order to try and maintain that sort of cross-party position, we asked the DCMS Select Committee to have a look at it. They produced a report, I'm sure the right honourable gentleman has seen, in the middle of 2011, that produced a series of recommendations for the football authorities. They were challenged to go away and work together on this, not something they had done enormously successfully up to that point. There's very often a bit of friction between the Football League, the Premier League and the FA. They have actually, in this instance, worked much more constructively together. They produced an interim response to the committee. They agreed the need to change and that they would bring new regulations forward by August of this year. The Select Committee, with our encouragement, invited them back to review progress at the end of last year, at the beginning of this, and then produced a report which basically said some progress but not quick enough, and contained a very straightforward recommendation to government that if further progress was not achieved by the middle of this year, then government should have no hesitation but to legislate. I think all those of us that have been in government would be properly wary of that move. But if that is the only way that we achieve proper progress in this area, then that is something that we are prepared to do, albeit that I would want that done on a cross-party basis. There would be little point in not doing that if government's changed and then the regulations were to move about. So, and an absolutely key part of any legislation would be the regulations around supporters' involvement in their football clubs. Those were the questions the right honourable gentleman asked me. I appreciate time is running out. Rather than my read through the script, I don't know if there's anything else he wants to ask me or whether he's happy with that. In which case, I think I would simply finish where I started. Thank him for both for bringing the debate and for the way he brought it. To wish him and other local MPs well with Coventry Football Club. It is a great football club. It does not deserve to have got into the position that it has got into, and I wish him and others every success in their efforts to try and bring about a brighter future for the football club.
Order. Stands adjourned.